How's it going, folks? CR here. And I want to take a moment to discuss an opinion piece I saw in the Atlantic. I'm going to put it in the link in the description, by the way. The title is, What If the Court Saw Other Rights as Generously as Gun Rights? Well, I mean, I can answer that question right there. You would probably have to jump through a lot of hoops just to exercise those rights, and then you guys would really be screaming oppression. And I'll get to what I mean by this here in a sec, but I just got to say, seriously, if we were treating other rights as gun rights, either you guys would really be complaining about how people have easy access to guns in this country, or you guys would be complaining about how things would be so restricted in this country. And that is true. I mean, if we treated things like education rights as the same as gun rights, say in like New York City or Washington, D.C., context, not many people would be getting an education. So I want to go on. In particular, the author of this opinion piece mentions two cases involving gun rights. D.C. versus Heller, which, for those of you who don't know, D.C. versus Heller was the one that got an outright handgun ban in D.C. lifted. It wasn't talking about any other restrictions. It was going to get, it got that outright ban in D.C. lifted. And then New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus New York. Now, I think New York City's already repealed that law and hopes to try to get the case dropped, but I think they're still ongoing with this. But for those of you who aren't aware of that, New York City passed this draconian ordinance, which, by the way, if you don't know, to get a license to get a handgun or any firearm in New York City, it's incredibly draconian, or as is. It has to be registered, you know, and there are a whole bunch of other restrictions that go along with it. And I'm not sure of the entire process, but everyone I know who's actually done so legally, who's talked about the process, it's a year-long process, and you're spending as much money on the license as you are the firearm, just about. So it would seem. But already with those restrictions as is, New York City decided to put another restriction on there, pretty much prohibiting the people who were licensed to own those firearms from taking the firearms outside the city to, say, a home they had in the rest of New York and taking them to ranges outside of New York City. So, and apparently, you know, opposing both an outright ban on handguns and opposing those draconian restrictions is apparently being incredibly generous to gun rights. So, either this author does not know what they're talking about, or they're outright being dishonest with you. And this is the thing with people on the gun control side of the aisle, is that they are dishonest, even with the context of things. The fact of the matter is that if we were to put some of the restrictions we have on firearms on, say, education, we would have a lot of people not getting an education, to say the least. And the state definitely wouldn't be paying for it. People would be paying the state, you know, just for the chance to get a license to, say, get an education. So already you can see just how far off base the gun control side of things really are. Now, when it comes to things like education, like with a more progressive view of the rights that they do like, if we were to treat firearm rights like that, well, we would be handing out M16 A4s to kids as they got into kindergarten, and they would be keeping it for life. That it would be exactly what would happen if we viewed gun rights in this country as the progressives view things like rights to education and health care. So there's a huge inconsistency right there as well. And I mean, going through this article, by the way, there are certain things I can understand on this. The author of it mentions the fact that people ruled against the ability for people to grow their own marijuana, which I agree, that should not be illegal. But guess what? There is an explicit protection on the right to keep and bear arms in the Constitution. There's not on marijuana. So if you want to argue that the ban on marijuana is unconstitutional, you would then actually have to go and take the strict constructionalist view on the Constitution and say, hey, look, Congress doesn't have the power to do that. But then you would also have to admit Congress does not have the power to do a lot of things. It does anyway. So, that being said, already there, you can't really, in principle, argue that the ban on marijuana is unconstitutional, and at the same time say all your proposals for federal level gun control and even state level gun control is constitutional. You're not being consistent. And the other thing I want to bring up on this, and I've said this with other things before, things like Kinder Surprise eggs, lawn darts, marijuana. Guys, if you were half as concerned about getting those things made legal as you were about gun control, well, they'd be legal already. But yet you chose not to do that. Whose fault is that? Alright. But anyway, for those of y'all who made it this far, thank y'all for watching. Go read the article for yourself. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about here. Y'all take her easy now. Have a great day.